The rain hit the windows like angry fingers trying to get inside. In the biggest bedroom of the biggest mansion in the city, a man sat alone in his wheelchair, staring at nothing. His name was Arthur. He owned 17 buildings. He had 3 cars he never drove. His bank account had more zeros than most people could count. But tonight, he was crying. Imagine being surrounded by wealth, yet drowning in loneliness. What if one whisper changed everything? Please, he whispered to the empty room. Please, I need someone. Outside his door, a young woman named Grace was carrying fresh towels. She stopped when she heard his voice. Her heart squeezed tight in her chest. Grace was new to the mansion. She had been working there for only 2 months. The other maids told her to stay away from Mr. Arthur. They said he was mean. They said he shouted when angry. They said his eyes were cold as winter ice. But Grace had seen something different. She had seen him staring out windows with sad, tired eyes. She had seen him touch an old photograph and look like he might break into pieces. She had seen loneliness wearing an expensive suit. Now, standing outside his door with towels in her shaking hands, Grace made a choice that would change everything. She knocked softly. Go away, Arthur said, his voice rough. Grace opened the door anyway. Arthur turned his wheelchair around fast. His face red with embarrassment. Tears were still wet on his cheeks. I said go away. Can't you follow simple orders? But Grace didn't run. She walked slowly into the room and placed the towels on a chair. Then she did something no one had done in years. She knelt down beside his wheelchair and looked right into his eyes. You're hurting, she said quietly. I can see it. Arthur's angry face crumbled. His hands gripped the wheelchair arms so tight his knuckles turned white. You don't understand. No one understands. I have everything. But I have nothing. I'm so alone. I could scream, but no one would care. They only see my money. They only see this chair. They don't see me. Grace reached out slowly and placed her small hand on top of his. Arthur froze. He stared at their hands like he was seeing magic. I see you, Grace whispered. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The rain kept falling. The big house creaked and groaned. And in that bedroom, something impossible began to grow. But what happens when kindness crosses the line into forbidden love? Stay with me, because the next moment will shock you. Arthur had not felt human touch in so long. Not real touch. Not the kind that means something. His doctors touched him. His nurses moved him. But no one had touched him with kindness. No one had touched him like he mattered. Why are you being nice to me? He asked, his voice breaking. Everyone else is afraid of me. Grace smiled just a little. Maybe everyone else isn't really looking. From that night on, everything changed. Grace began bringing Arthur his tea in the mornings. She would stay for a few minutes, asking about his day. At first, Arthur didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to people caring. But slowly, he started talking. He told her about his childhood, about building his company, about the accident that took his legs. He told her about feeling like a king in a castle with no kingdom, just empty rooms and echoes. Grace listened. Really listened. And when she cleaned his room, she hummed soft songs that made the sadness feel lighter. The other servants noticed. They whispered in corners. Why does he let her stay so long? They asked. Why does he smile when she's near? But Arthur didn't care about whispers. For the first time in forever, he felt alive. One evening, 3 weeks after that rainy night, Grace brought Arthur his dinner. As she set the tray down, she accidentally knocked over a spoon. It clattered loudly on the floor. Oh, I'm so sorry, Sir 382, she gasped, dropping to her knees to pick it up. Arthur watched her, and something twisted in his chest. Here was this beautiful soul apologizing for a spoon, while he lived in luxury and couldn't even stand up without help. Grace, he said softly. She looked up from the floor, the spoon in her hand. Don't call me sir anymore. Just Arthur, please. Her eyes went wide. Servants never call their masters by their first names. It wasn't allowed. It crossed a line that wasn't supposed to be crossed. But Grace nodded. Okay, Arthur. Hearing his name in her voice felt like sunlight after years of darkness. The days turned into weeks. The weeks turned into a month, and the feelings Arthur had been trying to ignore grew stronger and stronger until they felt like fire in his chest. He knew it was wrong. She was his maid. He was her employer. There were rules. There were walls between their worlds that weren't supposed to come down. But the heart doesn't care about rules. One night, another storm came. Thunder shook the mansion. Lightning lit up the sky in angry flashes. Grace knocked on Arthur's door. I brought you tea. I thought the storm might keep you awake. Arthur was sitting by the window watching the rain. His face looked haunted. Come in, Grace. Please. She entered and set the tea on the table, but when she turned to leave, Arthur's voice stopped her. Don't go. Grace froze. Please, Arthur continued, his voice shaking. Just stay for a little while. I can't be alone tonight. I can't. Grace walked over to him slowly. She could see he was trembling. Not from cold, from something deeper. Arthur, what's wrong? He turned his wheelchair to face her. His eyes were full of tears and something else. Something desperate, something raw. I need to tell you the truth, he whispered. I need to say it out loud before I lose my mind. Grace's heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. Arthur reached out and took both of her hands in his. His grip was gentle but urgent. Grace, I need you, not as a maid, not as someone who works for me. I need you as someone who makes me feel human again. Someone who makes this empty house feel like it has air in it. Tears started sliding down Grace's face. When you're near me, I can breathe, Arthur continued, his words tumbling out like water breaking through a dam. When you smile, the pain gets smaller. When you touch my hand, I remember what it feels like to matter. I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but Grace. He pulled her closer, his eyes locked on hers. I need to make love. Don't move. The words hung in the air like thunder. But Arthur wasn't talking about bodies. He was talking about hearts. He was talking about the kind of love that saves people, the kind that heals, the kind that's so pure it hurts. I need to make love to this moment, he whispered. To this feeling, to you being here. Don't move. Don't leave. Just let me feel this. Let me feel alive. Grace knelt down beside his wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. She understood. She understood everything. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered back. And in that moment, in that storm, in that mansion full of expensive things and empty hearts, two people found something money could never buy. They found each other. But love like this comes with a price. What happens when the world tries to tear them apart? You won't believe the twist coming next. But neither of them knew that this beautiful, impossible moment would soon be torn apart by something neither could control. Because sometimes love isn't enough to break the rules of the world. And sometimes a person who saved you has to leave you to truly set you free. Arthur woke up with a smile on his face for the first time in years. The storm had passed. Sunlight was streaming through his bedroom windows. His heart felt lighter than air. Last night, Grace had stayed with him until the rain stopped. They had talked. They had laughed. They had shared secrets in the darkness like two children hiding from the world. He couldn't wait to see her again. Arthur rolled his wheelchair to the window and looked out at the garden. The flowers were bright and alive after the rain. Everything looked new. Everything looked beautiful. Grace will love this view, he thought, his heart dancing in his chest. He rang the bell for breakfast. Usually Grace came within minutes. But this morning, a different maid appeared at his door. Her name was Martha, and she looked nervous. Where's Grace? Arthur asked immediately. Martha's eyes dropped to the floor. She's not here, sir. Arthur's smile disappeared. What do you mean she's not here? Is she sick? Is she taking the day off? Martha shifted her feet, still not looking at him. No, sir. She's gone. She left this morning before the sun came up. She folded her uniform, left it on her bed, and walked out the front door. She didn't tell anyone she was leaving. She didn't say goodbye. The words hit Arthur like a punch to the stomach. That's impossible. She wouldn't just leave. Not without telling me. Not after last night. But Martha just shook her head sadly and left the room. Arthur sat frozen in his wheelchair, his mind spinning in circles. Grace was gone. The one person who made him feel alive. The one person who saw him as more than a rich man in a chair. Gone. No, he whispered to the empty room. No, no, no. He wheeled himself out of his bedroom as fast as he could. His hands were shaking as he pushed the wheels. He went to the servants' quarters, to the room where Grace had slept. The door was open. The bed was made perfectly. Her uniform was folded neatly on the pillow, but Grace wasn't there. Her small bag of belongings was gone. It was like she had never existed at all. Arthur grabbed the uniform and held it to his chest. It still smelled like her, like soap and kindness and hope. Why? He cried out loud. Why would you leave me? The other servants heard him and came running. They found him in Grace's room, tears streaming down his face, holding her uniform like it was made of gold. Sir, please, Martha said gently. Come back to your room. You'll make yourself sick. But Arthur didn't move. He just kept whispering Grace's name over and over again. The days that followed were the darkest of Arthur's life. He searched everywhere for Grace. He hired people to find her. He called every hospital, every shelter, every place he could think of, but it was like she had vanished into thin air. No one knew where she had gone. No one had seen her leave. Arthur stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. He just sat in his wheelchair by the window, staring at nothing, waiting for a lacked miracle that wouldn't come. The mansion, which had started to feel warm with Grace's presence, turned cold again, colder than before. Now it wasn't just empty. It was haunted by her memory. Arthur would wheel himself through the halls at night, calling her name. Grace. Grace, where are you? Please come back. I need you. But only echoes answered him. The other servants watched with broken hearts. They had never seen their master like this. They realized now that Grace hadn't been just a maid to him. She had been his reason to keep living. Weeks crawled by like wounded animals. Arthur's health got worse. Doctors came to the mansion and shook their heads. He's giving up, they told each other. He doesn't want to live anymore. One doctor tried to talk to Arthur. Sir, you need to eat. You need to rest. You're going to die if you keep going like this. Arthur looked at the doctor with empty eyes. Then let me die. What's the point of living when the only person who made life worth living is gone? The doctor had no answer for that. At night, Arthur would sit at his piano. He hadn't played in years. Not since the accident. But now, he would press one key over and over. Just one note. The same note Grace used to hum when she cleaned his room. That single note became his prayer. His cry, his way of calling to her across whatever distance separated them. But Grace didn't come. What Arthur didn't know was that across the city in a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a broken window, Grace was crying too. She sat on a mattress on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest, her whole body shaking with sobs. I'm sorry, she whispered to the empty room. I'm so sorry, Arthur, but I had to leave. I had to. Grace had left because she was afraid. Not of Arthur. Never of Arthur. She was afraid of what people would say. She was afraid of ruining his reputation. She was afraid that their love, so pure and beautiful in private, would become ugly gossip in public. She had heard the other servants whispering. She had seen the suspicious looks. She knew what they were thinking. The poor maid is trying to trap the rich master. She's using him for his money. The thoughts had made Grace sick to her stomach. She didn't want Arthur's money. She just wanted him. But no one would ever believe that. No one would ever understand. So, she had made the hardest choice of her life. She had left to protect him, to save his name, to keep their beautiful secret from becoming a scandal. But leaving had torn her heart into pieces. Every day, Grace worked at a new job cleaning offices at night. Every night she cried herself to sleep thinking about Arthur. Was he okay? Was he eating? Did he hate her for leaving? She wanted to write to him to explain. But what could she say? How could she make him understand that leaving him was the most loving thing she could do? Grace would walk past churches and stop to pray. "Please, God," she would whisper. "Please let Arthur forget about me. Please let him find happiness. Please let him heal." But she couldn't pray for herself to forget him. That was impossible. Arthur was written on her heart in permanent ink. Months passed. 3 long, painful months. Arthur had stopped searching. He had stopped hoping. He just existed, moving through each day like a ghost in his own house. Then one morning, Martha brought him his mail. Among the bills and business letters, there was a simple white envelope with no return address. Just his name written in careful, gentle handwriting. Arthur's heart stopped. He knew that handwriting. His hand shook so badly he could barely open the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper folded carefully. He opened it and began to read. "Dear Arthur, I know you must be angry with me. I know you must wonder why I left without saying goodbye. I think about that every single day and it breaks my heart all over again. I left because I love you. I know that doesn't make sense, but I couldn't bear to watch people whisper about you. I couldn't stand the thought of being the reason people talk badly about you. You deserve respect. You deserve dignity. And I was afraid my presence would take that away from you. But Arthur, I want you to know something. Those nights we talked, those moments we shared, those were the happiest moments of my entire life. You made me feel seen. You made me feel valuable. You made me feel like I mattered. I pray for you every single day. I pray that you're eating. I pray that you're resting. I pray that you're finding peace. Please don't spend your days looking for me. Please don't let your health suffer because of my choice. Please live, Arthur. Live for both of us. You saved me in ways you'll never understand. And I will carry you in my heart until the day I die. With all the love in the world, Grace." By the time Arthur finished reading, the letter was wet with his tears. She loved him. She had left because she loved him. And suddenly, Arthur knew exactly what he had to do. He didn't care what people said. He didn't care about gossip or scandal or reputation. None of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was finding Grace and telling her the truth, that she was more important than his name, that she was more valuable than his fortune, that she was worth more than everything he owned combined. Arthur called Martha into his room. "Pack my bags," he said, his voice strong for the first time in months. "I'm going on a journey." Martha's eyes went wide. "But sir, the doctor said you're too weak to travel." Arthur smiled, a real smile, the first one since Grace had left. "Then I'll die trying. Because a life without Grace isn't a life worth living anyway." And so Arthur began the most important journey of his life. He had no idea where Grace was. The letter had no return address, but he had one clue. She had mentioned working at night, and she had mentioned praying at churches. So Arthur traveled from town to town, city to city, asking about a young woman with gentle eyes who cleaned at night and prayed during the day. The journey was hard. His body was weak. The wheelchair made everything difficult. But Arthur didn't give up. He couldn't give up. Grace was out there somewhere, thinking she had to stay away to protect him. He needed to find her. He needed to tell her that she was his protection. She was his shield against loneliness. She was his armor against despair, and he would search until his last breath to find her again. But will he find her before it's too late? The ending will leave you in tears. Keep listening. Arthur's car stopped in front of a small church at the edge of a quiet town. The building was old and simple with a wooden cross on top and flowers growing wild around it. Arthur had been traveling for 2 weeks. His body was tired, his heart was pounding, but something told him this was the place. "Wait here," he told his driver, and wheeled himself toward the church. It was late afternoon. The sun was golden and warm. Birds sang in the trees. Everything felt peaceful, like the world was holding its breath. And then Arthur saw her. Grace was kneeling in the church garden, helping a group of small children plant flowers. She was wearing a simple dress, her hair tied back with a ribbon. She was laughing at something one of the children said. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. She looked exactly the same. Beautiful, kind, like an angel who had accidentally fallen to earth. Grace, he whispered. She didn't hear him. She was too far away. So Arthur wheeled himself closer, his heart hammering in his chest like thunder. One of the children noticed him first. A little girl with pigtails pointed and said, "Look, that man is coming." Grace turned around. When their eyes met, the whole world stopped. Grace's face went pale. Her hands flew to her mouth. Tears spilled down her cheeks instantly. "Arthur!" she breathed. "Arthur, is that really you?" She ran to him. Actually ran. She didn't care that the children were watching. She didn't care about anything except getting to him. Grace fell to her knees in front of his wheelchair and grabbed his hands. "You came," she sobbed. "You found me. But Arthur, your health. You shouldn't have traveled. You're not strong enough." Arthur was crying too. Big messy tears of joy. "I'm strong enough for this," he said. "I'm strong enough for you, Grace. I read your letter, and I need you to understand something." He cupped her face in his hands, looking deep into her eyes. "You didn't ruin my reputation by being in my life. You gave me a life worth having a reputation for. Without you, I was just a rich man waiting to die. With you, I was alive. I was alive, Grace." Grace shook her head, tears streaming. "But people will talk. They'll say terrible things about us. About you. Let them talk," Arthur said fiercely. "Let the whole world talk. I don't care, Grace. I would rather have one day with you and face 1,000 cruel words than live 100 years in silence without you. You are not my scandal. You are my salvation." The children had gathered around them now, watching with wide eyes. The priest in the church had come out too, curious about the commotion. Grace looked around at all the watching faces and then back at Arthur. And suddenly she started to laugh. Not a sad laugh, a free laugh. A laugh that sounded like chains breaking. "I've been so afraid," she said through her tears and laughter. "So afraid of what people would think. But you traveled across the world to find me. You could have died making this journey. And you came anyway." "Of course I came," Arthur said simply. "You're my home, Grace. Not that mansion, not my money. You, where you are is where I belong." The priest stepped forward, smiling. "Young lady, I think this man loves you very much." Grace nodded, unable to speak. "Then what are you waiting for?" the priest asked gently. "Love like this doesn't come along very often. When it does, you hold on to it with both hands." Grace looked at Arthur. Arthur looked at Grace, and without another word, she climbed into his lap on the wheelchair and wrapped her arms around his neck. They held each other like two people who had been drowning and finally found air. The children clapped. The priest wiped his eyes. And somewhere in heaven, angels smiled. That day changed everything. Grace didn't go back to the mansion, and Arthur didn't want her to. Instead, they found a small cottage at the edge of town. It had 2 rooms, a tiny kitchen, and a garden where Grace could plant flowers. It was nothing like Arthur's mansion. The cottage had cracks in the walls. The roof leaked when it rained. The floors creaked when you walked on them. But to Arthur, it was paradise. For the first time in his life, Arthur wasn't living in a house. He was living in a home. And there's a big difference. Grace cooked simple meals. Arthur told jokes that made her laugh. They sat together in the evenings watching the sun go down. They talked about everything and nothing. They were just together. The people in town whispered at first, just like Grace had feared. "Did you hear? That rich man is living with his maid in a tiny cottage. How strange. How scandalous." But then something interesting happened. The whispers changed. People saw Arthur wheeling himself to the market with Grace beside him, both of them smiling. They saw Grace reading to Arthur under the big tree in their garden. They saw the way Arthur looked at Grace like she had hung the moon and stars. And slowly the whispers became softer. "Did you see them today? They look so happy. I've never seen two people more in love. Maybe money doesn't buy happiness after all." Arthur's health, which had been failing when Grace left, began to improve. Not completely. His body was still weak. He still couldn't walk. But his spirit was strong. His heart was full, and that made all the difference. One evening about 6 months after they had reunited, Arthur and Grace were sitting in their garden. The fireflies were coming out, making the air look magical. Grace was humming that soft song she always hummed. "Grace," Arthur said quietly. "Yes? Do you ever regret it, giving up your job at the mansion? Living in this small cottage instead of surrounded by luxury?" Grace stopped humming and looked at him with such love in her eyes that Arthur felt his breath catch. "Arthur, I spent my whole life in mansions. I cleaned them. I served in them. I saw all that wealth and luxury every single day. But I was never home in any of those places. Here in this cottage with the leaky roof and creaky floors with you beside me, this is the first place I've ever truly belonged. So no, I don't regret it. Not for one single second." Arthur reached out and took her hand. "I used to own 17 buildings," he said. "I had bank accounts full of money. I had cars and art, and everything money could buy. But Grace, sitting here with you in this tiny garden with fireflies and flowers is worth more than all of it combined. This is what I was rich for. Not to own things, but to finally understand what actually matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just holding hands and watching the fireflies dance. But as the months went on, Arthur's body grew weaker again. Not because he was sad, but because time catches up with everyone eventually. His heart, which had been broken for so long before Grace, was tired. The doctors came to the cottage and spoke in quiet voices. "There's nothing more we can do," they told Grace. "Just keep him comfortable. Keep him happy. That's all that's left now." Grace nodded. Even though her heart was breaking into a million pieces, she cared for Arthur with a love that was fierce and gentle at the same time. She made him soup. She read him books. She held his hand through the long nights when the pain was bad. And Arthur, even though he was dying, was more at peace than he had ever been in his life. One night, when the moon was full and bright, Arthur woke Grace up. "Grace," he whispered. "Come sit with me, please." Grace helped him into his wheelchair and pushed him out into the garden. The night air was cool and sweet. The stars were so bright, they looked like diamonds spilled across black velvet. "Grace," Arthur said, his voice weak but clear. "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Grace said, tears already forming in her eyes because she knew. She knew this was goodbye. "When I'm gone, I need you to keep living. Really living, not just existing. I need you to plant flowers and laugh with children and watch sunsets. I need you to remember that life is precious and short and beautiful. Promise me." Grace was crying now, big tears rolling down her face. "I promise," she whispered. "But Arthur, how can I live without you? You saved me." Arthur smiled, even though he was so tired. "No, my dear Grace, we saved each other. That's what love does. It saves both people at the same time." He reached out and touched her face one last time. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for staying when everyone else left. Thank you for teaching me that the richest man isn't the one with the most money, it's the one who is most loved." "I love you," Grace sobbed. "I love you so much." "I know," Arthur said peacefully. "I've always known. And Grace, I'll love you forever. Even when I'm gone, even in whatever comes next, I'll be loving you." And then, with Grace holding his hand and the stars shining above them, Arthur closed his eyes and let go. He died the way he had finally learned to live, peacefully. Loved. Home. Grace buried Arthur under the big tree in their garden, the one where they had spent so many evenings together. She planted flowers all around his grave. Bright, beautiful flowers that bloomed every season. The people from town came to the funeral. They brought food and tears and kind words. They realized too late, maybe, that they had witnessed something rare. True love. The kind that doesn't care about money or status or what other people think. The kind that just is. Grace kept her promise to Arthur. She kept living. She worked at the church, helping children and elderly people. She planted gardens all over town. She smiled when she thought of Arthur instead of only crying. And every evening she would sit under the tree where he was buried and tell him about her day. "The roses are blooming beautifully this year," she would say. "You would love them, Arthur. And today, a little boy at the church told me I have a kind smile. You used to tell me that, too." People in town called Grace the woman who loved a millionaire. But that wasn't quite right. Grace was a woman who loved a man. A man who happened to be a millionaire. And that man loved her back in a way that changed both of their lives forever. Years later, when Grace was old and her hair had turned silver, children would ask her about the man buried under the tree. "Who was he?" they would ask. And Grace would smile that gentle smile and say, "He was a man who had everything but nothing. And then he found the one thing that mattered. He found love. Real love. The kind that heals broken hearts and makes small cottages feel like palaces." "Did he make you rich?" the children would ask. Grace would laugh softly. "Oh yes, he made me the richest woman in the world. Not with money, but with something far more valuable. He taught me that the greatest wealth is having someone who sees you, really sees you, and stays." The story of Arthur and Grace became a legend in that small town. Parents told it to their children, and those children told it to their children. It became a reminder that in a world obsessed with money and status and power, the things that actually matter are simple. Kindness, connection, love, being seen, being known, being chosen. Grace lived until she was very old. And when she finally closed her eyes for the last time, the people of the town buried her next to Arthur under that big tree, right where she belonged. And if you visit that town today, you'll find that tree still standing, still surrounded by flowers, still marking the spot where two people found each other against all odds and loved each other despite all obstacles. The tree has a small plaque now, and on that plaque are carved these simple words. "Here lie Arthur and Grace. He had everything but needed love. She had nothing but gave everything. Together they found that the greatest riches in life cannot be bought. They can only be received from a heart that truly sees you." So remember this the next time you think wealth is measured in money. Remember Arthur and Grace. Remember that the poorest person with love is richer than the richest person without it. Remember that sometimes the people who seem to serve you are actually the ones sent to save you. And remember that true love isn't about possession or power or status. It's about grace. That moment when someone sees all your scars, all your broken pieces, all your flaws, and doesn't run away. They stay. They kneel down beside your wheelchair. They hold your hand in the storm. That's grace. That's love. And that's the only wealth that matters.